I'm very happy to be here with Polly Young Eisendrath. She's a Ph.D. and founder and owner for the Institute for Dialogue Therapy, PC, and Real Dialogue, LLC. It's a pleasure being here in Vermont in your beautiful home with, you have to see these stunning views here in front of us. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here and for interviewing me.
Oh, you're quite welcome. First of all, let's start out by, if you can just tell everybody who you are and why we're here talking today.
Okay, so I'm a psychologist. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm also a Jungian psychoanalyst. That's Carl Jung's school of psychoanalysis. And I am a longtime practitioner of Buddhism and mindfulness, and a mindfulness teacher. So I have lots of different labels and different kinds of flags I fly under. But what I'm devoting my life to right now is this method called Real Dialogue, and it's also a couples therapy method called dialogue therapy. And I developed dialogue therapy with my late husband, Ed Epstein, back in the mid-'80s. I've written 3 books about it, and my most recent book is Love Between Equals, Relationship as a Spiritual Path. And that book came out with Shambhala this year, 2019. And it is actually a book that guides couples through the process of moving through these repetitive conflicts to find an emotional space in which they can renew their intimacy, in which they can get to know each other again and really open that capacity to hear each other accurately, to actually see the other person as a separate person. So I have been doing the method of Real Dialogue inside of couple therapy for many years now, for many decades even, and I've developed and refined it using more of the mindfulness skills now, and we're pulling out the method, and we will be using it in training in corporate environments. We will also be using it as a training for executive coaches, leaders, life coaches, people who want to both increase their skills and their abilities to move through the kind of vicious cycle of repetitive conflict, and then to help others do the same. Because these kinds of conflicts, as you know, are very much in the public and private domain these days, as we've fallen into something like just an oppositional, repetitive sort of conversation about so many things that touch on the cultural, the political, the, I would just say also the real sides of our lives. And it's a very confusing time in terms of repetitive conflict. So, you know, some years ago, it was about 3 years ago, when I decided to, you know, take the dialogue therapy model out into a bigger framework, helping people who are caught in this inability to reach any kind of solutions, problem solving, anything that seems to be creative or fresh, because every time they get into a conflict, they just say the same things to each other, and it goes nowhere, and it's emotionally wounding, and it's tiring emotionally.
What an amazing creation to have some sort of resolution, but what we know it as, or what I know it as, is conflict resolution. And what I'm hearing is that you're doing it and taking it in a different way, and where perhaps there is actually solution to this.
Well, it's different. It's really different from conflict resolution.
Right.
It's really different from what people call sort of useful confrontation, and it's really different from what's called nonviolent communication. And how is it different? It's actually a method for using the conflicts, the opposing sides, in a way to open a space where you can discover something new that you could not have discovered without talking to that person, without actually using the conversation with somebody who has a different point of view who has a different belief system, who has perhaps also a different view of your relationship. Like if it's a personal relationship, the two people may be locked into different ways of seeing their relationship, ways that are painful. So in all of those situations, in home or work or in the world, what the real dialogue method is doing, it's allowing you to create an emotional space in which you can work with your own thoughts and feelings so that you can remain curious about the conflict. And in that way, use conflict creatively, take the differences to the next level so that, instead of having a repetitive, deadening kind of engagement with a person who sees things differently, believes things differently, or by whom you felt hurt and harmed. Instead of having that engagement, you're able to have a useful, creative engagement with that person. We're going to have to stop because she's just going to do this.
Yeah,
so,
that's okay.
Yeah, but I think what we could do is, if we can probably do it later if you want.
Sure.
I mean, we could edit this in.
Sure,
Or
but I
we
don't, it's fine when the dog barks.
but there are going to be a lot of people coming now. She's going to
Okay.
bark. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably what.
I'm here.
But I
I
think,
think the conversation is going really well. I like this.
yeah.
And if we need to,
Would you like to continue it for maybe
Sure, let's
another
do that.
5 minutes or
Yeah.
so? And then we can also, I wouldn't mind doing this again. I feel like it's gotten us going,
Yes.
but we can pick it up. I know
Okay.
that. I've done it many times. But so the main thing is that I know, and I'm sure you know, everybody really knows, that we can't get anywhere as individuals by ourselves.
exactly.
All creative work is interactive, and the dyad is the main sort of unit of human relationship, because we come into the world inside of another person, and the very first thing that we actually experience in terms of relationship is looking in the face of the mother.
Yeah.
And so that dyadic relationship is a fundamental emotional contact that allows us to feel at ease and to be creative. And honestly, we can't see the world very clearly as individuals. We need each other, and we need the differences, and we need the opposite sides. And in a relationship at home, we need to be able to work through differences so we can return to the sense of being at ease and being intimate and so on. So at every level, we need to be able to work with both sides and not just defend, the individual side of things. And that's what real dialogue allows people to do. It's both a skill that you learn yourself, and it takes some learning because it's like a mindfulness skill. And you have to be able to learn to work with your emotional reactivity in the moment that it's happening so that you can keep your ears open and your eyes open, which is not easy.
No, and the skill of listening, that in itself is something I think it is to be learned and can take a very long time to truly learn.
Yes, well, especially when you're emotionally activated.
Right.
And especially when you're emotionally activated with somebody that you've had repetitive conflict with or whose ideas you don't believe. Because the listening is actually, your whole organism cuts off from listening and hearing when you feel emotionally threatened.
Right.
So that's a difficult skill to develop, but once people get it, it's like any other kind of skill, from learning how to play tennis to learning how to do rock climbing or to play the piano. You can read about this stuff, you can hear about it, but until you practice it, until you do it, you don't know really what it is. And it's the same with this. Once you start to practice the skills, then you're able to go into a conflict and at least work with yourself. But then when you set up the method with somebody, the two people together, then they can enter into that creative process of being able to hear each other and actually maybe see a different point of view. A lot of times what happens is people go, oh, that's what you're saying. Oh, I didn't get that at all. And then they begin to hear where they maybe do have common ground, or they simply discover something that neither one of them has ever thought of, because they couldn't have thought of that on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So and then you can take that method into all sorts of discovery processes where you're trying to create something new, or where you're trying to work with differences in ideology, or differences in belief systems, or even differences in perception. Like I'm really interested in the different ways in which human beings understand what happens after we die.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are some very interesting differences.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are belief systems, and some of them come from people's actual near-death experiences. Mm-hmm. But often when people start to talk about that, they get very defensive, mm-hmm. because they have some belief system that in a certain sense their whole life depends on, because the way they're living their lives is depending somewhat on what they think is going to happen after they die.
And it's about being heard as well.
Yes,
it's such a need to be heard.
That's right. Once people get into explaining what they believe, mm-hmm. they feel this emotion about, I want you to get it. Mm-hmm. I want you to, you're not mm-hmm. getting it. And then the person listening may not be actually hearing it. Mm-hmm. And that goes back and forth. And then we begin to see each other also visually in a way that is defensive. We look at the person looks like they're, sort of snarling at us, mm-hmm. but that's not really what's going on. So again, opening that space, and it's an emotional space in which you can feel at ease to some extent with yourself when you're being attacked, when you're being misunderstood. And then if both people can do that, there's a discovery process that they could not have done in any other way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That was very informing, and I really look forward to hearing more about what you're going to be doing. So I just want to thank you for having this discussion this morning, and we'll continue again. I'd love to do it again. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm Amina Motala with Blockchain Media, and this is Polly Young Eisendrath.
Yes. Well, it's been great having you here, and then also this conversation. I hope we can talk more.
We will. Thank you.